Hi, I'm Phil Noble with Envision South Carolina, and we're here at the University Center in Greenville talking to Brad Wyche. Brad is the founder of Upstate Forever, one of the premier environmental organizations in the state. And welcome, Brad.
Thank you, Phil. It's great to have you in the Upstate.
Well, thank you. Talk a little bit about your growing up in South Carolina. The Wyche family's been up here forever. When did you first sort of develop some consciousness about being a South Carolinian and we were different and our state was unusual? What struck you?
Well, my father had me out canoeing and hiking and backpacking with him at a very early age, and we spent a lot of time in the South Carolina mountains. And so I immediately became aware that we are very blessed and fortunate to have this incredible resource in our mountains. We don't have a lot of mountains in the state, but the quality of the mountains is truly exceptional. We have the Blue Ridge Escarpment, which runs across northern Greenville, Pickens, and Oconee counties. It's been recognized as an ecosystem of global significance, a lot of biological diversity, spectacular gorges and waterfalls. So Dad and I spent a lot of time up there exploring and walking around, and we both became inspired about what we have in the mountains. And then he started the state's second land trust, natural land trust, in 1973 to really be the catalyst for protecting a lot of those mountain lands. So that was really my first awareness of what a special place the state is, and specifically the mountains. And since then, as I've grown up, and I've lived in South Carolina my whole life except for going off to school and working 1 year in Washington, you know, I've seen other parts of the state. I served on the State Coastal Council for 9 years and became very familiar with the phenomenal coastal resources we have. I've done some exploring in Congaree Swamp, and we really have a treasure of natural resources in our state that we should all be very appreciative of. And I think we can do a lot more in showcasing those resources and using those resources as a way to boost economic prosperity, and at the same time protecting them, really making the protection of our natural resources an absolute top priority.
Do you think that we are more blessed, is your word? I mean, there's North Carolina, there's Georgia, there's Oregon, Washington. I mean, are we really that special, or is it just we think we're that special and we're happy that it is?
I think we're really that special. I mean, North Carolina certainly has mountains and they have a coast, but you know, we have almost a third of all the salt marsh acreage on the Atlantic coast. And again, the Blue Ridge Escarpment is globally significant because of the rapid change in topography and the diversity of the plant life. We've got these great black rivers. I was down there speaking last month at the Friends of the Edisto annual meeting, and what an incredible river the Edisto River is. I honestly didn't know that much about it till I went down there and learned more at the Friends of the Edisto meeting. It's one of the longest blackwater rivers in the world. We've just got a lot of great natural resources here, and I would put South Carolina up against any other state and any other country in terms of natural resources.
Where do we compare in terms of being good stewards of those resources?
We have some great conservation success stories in the state that have been primarily driven by the private sector. The work that Dad did in the mountains, that really, he was the catalyst for that. And he would be the first to tell you that he couldn't have done it without the support of the State Department of Natural Resources, DNR, and Parks, Recreation, and Tourism, PRT, and the Department of Interior. They were very supportive, but Dad really led the effort. And then down the coast, you've got the great conservation success story with the Ace Basin. That was really an effort led by the private sector. The effort in saving the Congaree Swamp, that was again a grassroots effort by our citizens. So a lot of the conservation success that we have in South Carolina is due to private grassroots efforts, with the state coming in sort of later in the game and being very supportive. And I think it's unfortunate that in South Carolina we do not really devote a substantial amount of state funding to the protection of our natural resources. Our three natural resource agencies, the Forestry Commission, PRT, and DNR, are always struggling for funding, and their budgets are cut often more severely than other state agencies. The Conservation Bank, as great as it is, was basically shut down for 4 years during the economic crisis, and now it's kind of struggling getting back on its feet. But even in its best years, it was only bringing in $15 to $18 million for the entire state, where tourism is our #1 industry, where we've got this phenomenal array of natural resources. And yet we had a big debate in the last legislative session about continuing the Conservation Bank for another 5 years, just extending it, not even talking about the funding. And it was a real battle to get the Conservation Bank approved. It finally passed in 2002, but it wasn't funded until 2004. The price that we had to pay to get the Conservation Bank through the General Assembly is this death clause that's in the Conservation Bank, which says that if half or more of South Carolina agencies sustain a budget cut, the Conservation Bank is zeroed out. It gets no funding, and that's basically what's happened the last 4 years, and the legislature did put a little bit of funding just to kind of keep the lights on. But I think that really shows how at the state level, in the General Assembly, conservation is not a top priority, and it should be, because we've got these phenomenal natural resources that are not only important from the standpoint of protecting ecosystems, but they can be a huge boost to our economy. USC released a study a couple of years ago, the Moore School of Business, quantifying the value of our natural resources, and it's almost $30 billion. That's a B, billion dollars per year in economic value, economic value of our natural resources. So I really thought that would be a big wake-up call in the General Assembly about the economic importance of these natural resources. And it really hasn't been. And I think all of us just need to keep working hard and trying to convince our representatives that these natural resources are important, both from the standpoint of their ecological significance and also from the standpoint of their economic value.
You talked about the private grassroots leadership around these kinds of issues. Is it still driving these issues? Is it diminished? Is it growing? Is it stagnant? Is it?
Phil, I think it's really growing. I mean, you look at the land trust movement in South Carolina. When Dad started Natural Land Trust back in 1973, it was only the second land trust in the state. We now have over 40. And more land is being protected through the efforts of private land trust. Again, the Conservation Bank is a very important part now of the private land trust efforts. In fact, at Upstate Forever, we are always seeking funds from the Conservation Bank to make conservation deals happen. So it's great to have some actual dollars that we can offer landowners to protect their properties. And in the Upstate, we did not really have any source of funding for land conservation work until the Conservation Bank passed. So it's been a great catalyst for private land trust efforts, and those efforts are expanding. I think more and more of our citizens are becoming supportive of those efforts. I think there's a big disconnect between what our citizens want and how they value our natural resources and our elected officials. You know, the polls show huge support in South Carolina for protecting natural resources, for keeping our air and water clean and in compliance with the standards. And yet we just don't see that being really, we don't see that same attitude in the General Assembly, which is puzzling and troubling to me.
Why do you think that is?
Like I say, it's puzzling and troubling, and maybe you can answer the question. I think some of it, the people really value the natural resources, and maybe they are not doing enough in communicating how important those resources are to them, to their elected officials. And that's what we do at our organization. We are constantly urging our members to get in touch with their elected representatives, both at the local level on land use and growth issues, and at the state level on conservation bank and water quality and air quality issues. And I think we can all do a better job of really communicating with our elected officials and making sure they know how important we, how we value these resources.
If you assume for the moment that our natural environment is this phenomenal world-class resource, if you will, what do we do with it? I mean, do we say, wait a minute, we don't want everybody coming. We're stay away. Let's just not talk about it and let's enjoy it. Or do we try? Or is there a way? Can we leverage that into other world-class attainments, growth, expansion, consciousness? I mean, how do we use that natural resource that is world-class to ratchet up other parts of this state that need a lot of help?
Right. Well, there's this growing industry of ecotourism, and more people are enjoying getting outdoors, and they're taking trips that are sort of adventure-based. And I think we could really tap into that growing industry of ecotourism.
But do we want to? I mean, do we want another 2 million people tromping through the escarpment?
Well, we have to manage the escarpment. We have to make sure that the rules and regulations to follow when people go out there and use and enjoy it. For example, National Geographic 2 weeks ago named the Jocassee Gorges in northern Pickens County as one of the 50 great places in the world.
That's fabulous.
And it is really, again, part of that escarpment, and it's just a spectacular place that very few people in South Carolina, I would submit very few people in Pickens County have visited.
Right.
So, and here is, not to pick on Pickens, right. But Pickens is trying to revitalize its downtown, boost its economy, and they've got it in their backyard. They got Jocassee Gorges, one of the world's great 50 places. And I've talked to the Pickens Rotary about this. That ought to be the focus of economic development.
Right.
You've got this phenomenal place 10 minutes away from downtown Pickens.
But you think we can leverage those natural resources in a way that is not killing the goose that laid the golden egg?
I do. I'm absolutely convinced that we can do that. And again, as more and more people come to enjoy the resources and spend money and provide jobs, we have to make sure that the use of those natural resources is properly managed. So we have to make sure they stay on the trails, and the trails are properly posted, and that if they're going to go rafting down the Chattooga River, they've got to get the permit from the Forest Service and wear a helmet, wear a life jacket. I think all of those issues can be managed. It'd be a nice problem to have if we've got a lot of people coming here and wanting to see and enjoy our natural resources. It'd be a nice problem to have in managing those folks. Right now, I mean, in the upstate, I don't have the data in front of me, but we're barely scratching the surface in getting folks to come here and enjoy these natural resources. Maybe it's different on the coast, in Charleston and Myrtle Beach, but up here, there's really not much, not a lot of folks coming here.
How do we grow it in a responsible way?
Well, I think on the National Geographic recognition, that ought to be the first thing the Pickens County Economic Development Office does, is publicize that we've been recognized, and we would love to have you all come and see Jocassee Gorges, spend some time in the upstate, in Pickens, and then it's the chicken and egg thing. People start coming, and they're going to need places to stay, give an opportunity for jobs with bed and breakfast and hotels in Pickens, which really doesn't have a great place for folks to stay right now, which is sort of amazing, with your Cassie right in the backyard. But Greenville's 20 minutes away, so they could stay in Greenville. And it just starts to build on itself. And
it's a change in mindset.
yes, we have so much to be proud of. Let's brag about it and promote it. And what we do in terms of just marketing our natural resources to the rest of the country and the world is pretty pitiful.
Are we endangering them? Are there threats to what we have?
There are threats in the lands, for example, in the mountains that are now protected, that are part of, for example, the Greenville watershed lands are now under conservation easement with the Nature Conservancy. They are truly protected lands. And the lands that are owned by PRT and DNR, they are not legally as well protected as the watershed lands, which are held by, which are protected through a conservation easement held by the Nature Conservancy. There's one thing that worries me is that these are state lands that don't have a conservation easement held by a private land trust, so they are subject to they're subject to political directives from the General Assembly. And one thing that concerns me is, legally, the General Assembly could say, we want to start selling off some of our Heritage Trust lands, some of your Cassie Gorges for revenues. I think there'd be a huge political battle, a real outcry if there was any attempt to do that. So in that sense, I think there is some risk in the state-owned lands because they are part of our political system. And if South Carolina is going to continue not to really value conservation, I think there's some risk there. And there was an effort several years ago where the state Budget and Control Board ordered the state agencies to transfer title to all their properties to the Budget and Control Board. That was a very terrifying directive where actually the state parks, title to the state parks would be going over to the Budget and Control Board, and decisions can be made there by 3 people.
Right.
So and there hasn't been any effort to do that, but I think the risk is there that the Budget and Control Board could say, well, maybe we need to sell off Jones Gap State Park or half of it and get some value for the real estate. Again, I think there would be a huge protest to doing that, and as more and more people come to appreciate and value our resources, I think that the chances of that happening are probably pretty slim, but it's there. I would love to see all those lands actually protected through a conservation easement held by a private land trust, and it would violate everything a land trust, a reputable land trust stands for to change or terminate a conservation easement.
A number of years ago, you were head of the DHEC board for Department of Health and Environmental Control for what, 4 years?
Yes, a little over 4 years.
A little over 4 years. That's going from the mountains to the mire. Talk about that experience. What did you learn about if we are truly aspiring to be world class and using the resources as a launching pad and a base and a leverage point to do that? How do we make the trade-offs? What are the politics of that? What are we needing to do within the state to affect that, having seen both sides of that equation?
Right. Well, I'll tell you one thing. I really learned a lot being on the board. Now, I was not down there every day. The board is a volunteer board. We met once a month. We dealt with the policy issues, and we handled administrative appeals. So I was not down there every day with the commissioner and the staff, but I really learned a lot in And I was pretty familiar with the environmental side of DHEC, but I did not know very much about the public health side. I learned a lot on that. And actually, I came into that position with this idea that DHEC was too big and that it would make more sense to split the agency, so you'd have one agency for the environment and one for public health. But I came out with the opposite conclusion, that I think the combination of those two big pieces, the environment and public health, work very well together because they are very closely connected. Keeping water clean is going to benefit public health. And so there's a real connection between the public health side and the environmental side. At the time I was there, and I'm not up to speed on the latest statistics, but there was a tremendous amount of turnover among the DHEC staff, especially among the nurses in the environmental engineering section, because they were able to get much better paying jobs in the private sector. So they would stay at DHEC 1 or 2 years. There were really high percentage rates of turnover. And I would look at these rates and say, how would any business be able to really function well with losing that many people each year? I think it was in the 15 to 20% annual turnover rate among nurses and environmental engineers. And it's really because we did not, as a state, we did not value those people enough to pay them really what they deserve in those jobs, and overloading them with a tremendous amount of work, more work than they really could handle in any 40-hour week. Just processing all these permit applications and monitoring environmental compliance and all the work that goes into making sure that we are meeting standards for clean air and clean water. So I think one of the absolute priorities that we need, not only at DHEC, but as I mentioned, DNR and PRT and forestry, is to really value the people that are working there every day and administering these complicated programs, and pay them what they deserve. Not necessarily exactly what they're making in the private sector, but more than what they're making now. Yeah. And I really saw some great folks on the DHEC staff, some really terrific public servants who were very frustrated by the workload and the lack of compensation, and a lot of them were leaving. It's a big agency, but it's a really important agency, and I think we need to value the folks that work there.
What are the barriers to us leveraging our natural resources in this quest, if you will, for world-class leadership?
The barriers?
Yeah.
I think, as I mentioned, I think one real barrier or challenge is convincing our elected representatives of how important these natural resources are. And I think it would be useful to actually get them out in the field to see them. We can send letters and photographs and PowerPoint presentations all we want, but we really need to get them out there to walk through Jocassee Gorges, to take a raft trip down the Chattooga River, to take the Jones Gap Trail. I remember when Dad and I were working on the Chattooga River, trying to get the Chattooga River included in the National Wild and Scenic River System back in the late 60s and early 70s. And Jim Mann was the representative for the 4th Congressional District at the time. What really turned him around is we got him to go on a raft trip down the Chattooga. He got off that raft and he said, "I am with you all the way." Because he saw firsthand what it was in the Chattooga. Talk about world class, and that is a world class river.
Oh, it is, yeah.
And it is being discovered among the paddling community. We do have a lot of folks coming here from all around the country and the world to enjoy it. But I'll never forget that. He said, "I am totally with you. I really now see what y'all have been talking about." And so I think about that a lot in trying to get our local elected officials, state representatives out there, just out in the field. Come with us on a hike. I'll get in front of the canoe. We'll go down the Saluda River. And I try to do that. and I've had some limited success. I've taken a couple of county council members in Greenville down the Reedy River, just so you could kind of see what this river is all about, and it was eye-opening for both of them. So I think more of that. I think we can address that challenge by getting them out in the outdoors in the field to really appreciate what we have. And then I think we, as you were asking me, we really need to do a better job of showing the link between these natural resources and economic prosperity, quantifying the value of ecotourism in South Carolina, and how it can lead to jobs, and using the USC Moore School study about the value of our natural resources. I mean, that is a great study, a lot of good research, solid findings, I mean, big numbers in there. And there's some recommendations in that study about how we can do a better job in getting the word out. So I think we all need to, keep that study on our desk and look at it a lot.
Assume for the moment that you are now charged with the twin goals of environmental stewardship of South Carolina, number one, and number two, leveraging those in some way to boost the whole status of attainment of our state to this world-class status. And we all get together and we say, we're going to coronate you King Brad. You're in charge. We're now all your loyal subjects. What would you have us do?
I think I would. One of the first things I think I would have us do as the benign dictator here,
right.
is I would use that Moore study as a foundation for really coming up with a plan, an action plan, not just a study that's filed away, but an action plan for how do we capitalize on our natural resources from the mountains to the sea. And we've done a study like that up here through the Greenville Convention and Visitors Bureau, looking at the upstate, and it's led to a proposal to establish a really cornerstone center in Greenville would be called Reedy Square, and also a center in the mountains called the Blue Wall Center. Blue Wall is the Cherokee term for the Blue Ridge Escarpment, because the potential is there, just unquestionably there. And so the recommendation from this study that was done in the upstate is that we need two physical places for people to come, to attract people, so they can know where to go and how to enjoy things, get information out about places to stay, things to do. So I would like to see a study like that done statewide, looking at the coast, the Midlands, the PD, use what we've already got up here to really come up with a state plan for showing this link between natural resources and economic prosperity. I think that's got to be the starting point. We don't really have a plan like that.
A business plan.
A business plan. A business plan for the state to show how we can link our natural resources with economic prosperity. And I think the study that was done up here through the Greenville Convention and Visitors Bureau would be a good model for that on a statewide basis.
Are we anywhere, I know the answer is never enough, but are we at least doing some of the right things in making the educational connection with kids and schools and next generation and learning and science? And I mean, are we taking advantage of that? I mean, you never do enough, right. but I mean, relative to sort of the rest of the countries, or how do you think we fare?
I don't think we're doing well on that at all. I was just meeting last month with a great organization in North Carolina called Muddy Sneakers. It's a private, nonprofit organization. They've been focused in North Carolina, and they are actually taking 5th graders and 8th graders out in the woods and teaching them about the environment. And they're doing
great name.
Yeah,
great
Muddy
name.
Sneakers. They're doing fantastic work, but you have to think when you hear about what they're doing, why are they having to do that? Why is that not being done in every school
Right.
in North Carolina? Why is that not being done in every school in South Carolina? Why do we have to have a nonprofit to come in and do that in 2 or 3 schools?
Right.
And hopefully, and I think this is part of Muddy Sneakers' goal, is that will inspire all the school districts eventually to include this in their standard curriculum. So
They
you're
got
actually
the
getting
buses,
folks.
They got the teachers. They
Right.
got. I mean, you know, that all you got to do is do it.
Right. And they do it in close coordination with the schools. I mean, the schools provide the transportation. But that is not the norm in North Carolina. It's not the norm in South Carolina. And these kids are getting out there. Some of them really, for the first time they've ever really spent any time in the woods.
Right.
Get them away from the TV
Right.
and the computer screens and just out in the woods for an hour a week.
Right.
Just something. And we're not doing that. And we're losing
And
a
it's
lot of young
doesn't cost
folks.
anything.
Right.
It's cheap. No,
Right.
yeah. That's a fabulous
There's-
idea. That's a fabulous idea.
A couple of great books about that subject. One called Last Child in the Woods.
Last Child in the
Really
Woods?
losing young
Yeah.
people and their connection to nature. And then Nature Deficit Disorder. There's
Nature
another book
deficit
along the
disorder.
same lines. Upstate Forever came about really as a result of Dad inspiring me to work in the environmental natural resources field, again from a very young age. So I've had this lifelong interest in the environment and natural resources. And then I was in the private practice of law, and in the mid-90s I just honestly was not getting much personal satisfaction out of the law business. And at the same time, I had this real passionate interest in the environment, and I was very concerned, I'm still very concerned about what is happening in the upstate in terms of growth and land use change, and not a real commitment across the 10 counties to conservation, and felt there was a real need to have an organization like Upstate Forever that would focus on how and where we're growing as a region, would offer a land trust opportunity in all 10 counties. The work that Dad was doing was limited to the mountains, which is great, but we did not have a land trust opportunity for all 10 counties. So I felt like there was a real void. So long story short, I decided in 1998 just to leave the law practice. I had thought about trying to do Upstate Forever half-time law practice. Decided that wasn't going to work. So I just decided to just leave the law business totally and started Upstate Forever in 1998. It's hard to believe next year will be our 15th anniversary.
Oh, that's great.
And just like any startup, I just started working out of the house, and we're membership based. We have a broad mission. It's promoting sensible growth and protecting special places in the upstate region. And we have 3 programs that are tied to that mission. Land Trust, which is protecting important lands and special places. Clean Air and Water, and Sustainable Communities, which is really looking at how and where we're growing as a region. And real short answer is we really are trying to keep the beautiful, thriving upstate region from becoming a place like Atlanta in terms of its growth pattern. Now, Atlanta's got some good things going for it, but its
Right.
growth pattern is
It's just
pretty
horrendous.
horrible. And we really don't want to see that happen to the upstate. So through our Land Trust, Clean Air and Water, and Sustainable Communities, we are really working hard to keep the upstate a beautiful, thriving, prosperous region. Envision South Carolina, world-class, globally connected.